Hello and welcome back to Just Code It. Today we're going to be taking a look at LangChain Expression Language, which is basically just a shorthand of making these LangChain chains, and it really condenses it, so it's really good to learn them and use them. To start, we're going to just create a very basic chain. How you create the chain, the syntax is you use this pipe operator. It's basically saying the prompt is getting piped into the LLM, so it's getting passed into the LLM, and then the LLM is going to pass its output into the string output parser. That's a good way to think about it, from left to right, just like reading, and that output of one gets put into the input of the other. Then you can see our prompt is right here, and then our chain. As you can see, what a chain is made up from is a runnable sequence. So instead of importing runnable sequence and then creating that sequence, what we're doing is using that pipe operator, and under the hood, it's creating that runnable sequence. As you can see here, it has our model, and then last is our output parser. Now let's run this chain. We're going to set a variable equal to results, and it's going to be chain.invoke, calling that invoke. And then we're going to pass it the topic, and then programming, print the results, and then just add a new line. After the basic chain, we're going to take a look at parallel processing with chains. You can parallel process these chains by using a runnable parallel. So right here, we're going to start by creating our pros and cons prompt by using the chat prompt template from template, and then just passing it our template string, just really changing the pros and cons word in it. After that, we create those chains by using the pipe operator. For the pros and cons, we create a pros chain and a cons chain. After creating the pros and cons chain, we then create a runnable parallel. Finally, we're just going to print the formatted prompt and the chain. So here you can see the pro prompt, and the chain is steps. So it's a runnable parallel, and it has steps. And we have the pros and the cons in there, runnable sequence, and then we're passing it those first, middle, last, just like before. Now let's run this chain. Here we're going to run it using parallel chain.invoke. Then we're going to grab the parallel results, pros, and then cons. So now we got our pros and our cons for this chain. Moving to section 3, where we're going to create some more advanced chains, where we're doing some data transformations using input methods and output methods, so we can transform the data or transform the input and output in a way that we want. To do this, we're going to create two methods. First method is process input, where we're just going to add a timestamp and capitalize the query. But what we're doing is we're copying the data, adding the query and uppercasing it, and then adding a word count, and then returning it. For our output function, we are going to remove all the new lines. The next method is the post-processing method, or the output processing method. What we do at first is we're going to strip away any of the leading or trailing white spaces and then split into new lines. Finally, we're going to return a dictionary with the summary being equal to the first word, or an empty string if it doesn't exist. And then details would be everything after that. Response length is just the length of that output, so the length of the response. Moving on, we have the advanced prompt. The prompt is using that chat prompt template, and then we're just going to pass it a prompt with query and then word count. You want this word count to line up, be the same as the input parser. So these two variables need to be the same, so that it will be able to take the dictionary that we pass it, this query, and then it will then pass it into this input parser. And then the input parser will also add to that dictionary the word count, and then pass it on to the LLM to process, but it will be put into the prompt template. After creating all the methods and creating the prompt, we are now going to create that chain using a runnable lambda. So runnable lambda just allows you to run a method and then get the response and use that response in an input for another part of the chain. We're using that runnable lambda, passing it the input, pre-process input, then passing the output of that into the advanced prompt output, into the LLM output, into the string output parser, into the runnable lambda for the output post-processing output. Now let's just give this a run and take a look at the prompt and the chain. Our prompt is answer. The query has 3 words. And then you can see our runnable sequence. Runnable lambda is the first, prompt is the middle, and ending with our other runnable lambda. Now let's move on to just running the full thing. So to create the advanced results, we're going to do advanced chain, invoke, and then pass it a query, and then a question. Then we're going to grab those results and print the summary, details, and then response length. We're going to get the response length from that. Running it, it's processing. This is pretty long, but here we have the details, response length. We have summary, so the first line, and then everything after summary. We have the details, and then we have the response length is 2,800 characters. Next up, we're going to work on an example for how you would use these chains, or the LangChain Expression Language, in creating RAG patterns, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. To do this, we're just going to simulate a retriever, so we don't have to create one right now, and it's just going to be a list of documents with random text I put in there. Return those documents. After that, we're going to create our RAG prompt, which is just a prompt template with our context and our question as inputs. To format the documents, we are going to grab the documents and add them all together, so join them all together to make one big document. The last step is creating that chain. We're going to create a RAG chain. This is created a bit differently, and you can also break this out, but I'm just illustrating how you can also have these in the chains, these functions. But we're going to do a runnable parallel, and what it's going to do is fill out the context in the question for us. For the context, we're actually going to use a chain to create the context. The context is created by a runnable lambda, simulate retriever. We're going to go grab that method above and simulate the retriever, which returns a list of documents. And then that is going to be passed to another runnable lambda where we format those documents. If you remember, it's just appending them together or joining them together. Then the question is a runnable pass-through, basically a placeholder. We're passing this through to be answered later. It's going to be a pass-through from our invoke. This output gets passed to our RAG prompt. Our prompt gets filled out and passed to the LLM, and then we parse the string at the end. Give that a run, and here you can see it. We have our first, which is a runnable parallel with context and question, our prompt template with context and question, and then it fills out our prompt, and our prompt would be, this is an example prompt. Finally, we can run it, and that's an example run. But that is it for LangChain Expression Language. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.